Hi, and welcome back to the Step Into Purpose podcast. Today I'm joined by my lovely friend Kristina, host of the She's Brave with Kristina Driscoll podcast. Kristina has an amazing story of strength and resilience. And in this two-part episode, we dive deep into how to manage anxiety and live with purpose. In part one, we'll explore how to calm your nervous system, create healthy habits, and reconnect with your authentic self. If you're looking for practical tools to manage stress and step into your true purpose, you're in the right place. Here's part one of my conversation with Kristina. Hi, Kristina. Welcome to the Step Into Purpose podcast.
Hello, Lydia. I am so beyond thrilled to be here. You are such a light to this world.
Oh, like the same goes for you, and it's wonderful to connect. You have an amazing podcast, She's Brave, and you are such an inspiration to me. You've really grown this incredible podcast and really started a movement with it. So I'd love you to share your journey a little bit and where it's taken you.
Yeah, I would love to because I feel like the last 2 years I've learned and grown the most in my entire life.
Wow.
Because I feel like anytime you start a business or a podcast or something similar to this, it really throws, I call it therapy on steroids, because all of your weaknesses and your flaws, as well as your strengths, are really thrown in your face, sometimes quite harshly.
Yes. So true.
Right. Yeah.
It's the best personal growth, isn't it? Starting your own business or podcast or thing.
It is the best. It's the best way to personally grow, in my opinion.
Yeah.
There's nothing that can do it better or faster.
So true.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Yeah. And here we are. So what had happened with me is I had been married. My husband got really ill. He had a long illness. He died. And, life goes on. And during that time, I had been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. That's part of why I started She's Brave with Kristina Driscoll, is I was like, hey, these days we tend to get labeled by doctors. They slap a label on you. Yeah. And then a lot of us think that, oh, well, that means I can't do this or that. Like, I can't start a podcast. I can't do this thing or that thing. And I was like, I'm going to prove everybody wrong.
Wow. It's amazing.
Yeah. And I was really at a place where I think you are, and I'm just kind of coming out the other side of it to some degree, where, your children are growing up, or maybe they've already grown up, as in my case. My son is now 21. And what happened was my son graduated from high school. I got remarried that same summer. And I literally was like, what is my next chapter? Like, in a previous life, I had been a financial advisor. I'd worked in finance, and that was not calling my name anymore at all.
Yeah.
Not to mention that takes all your time and resources when you're managing people's money. It's their blood, sweat, and tears, and you are working all the time. So I was like, I don't want to live that way. So I was in a place where probably a lot of your listeners are. Like, they're saying, I don't know who I am. I don't even know who I am anymore. I've been a mother, I've been a wife, I've been, doing all these things, and I don't know who I am anymore. So what I always say is, if you don't know, just do something. Just take anything. Like, even if it doesn't feel 100% right, take some kind of action. In my case, I was like, well, I kind of want to write a book, but I just knew that was just too daunting for me. I thought, and then someone said, well, podcasting is like writing, so why don't you consider that? And I saw a class advertised, and so I signed up. And I think that was like the hardest part, was signing up for the class. That was one of the hardest things, was just signing up, showing up for the first class live with all these people on Zoom, and just hiding in the corner, literally not saying a word. That was me. Yeah.
But it's so interesting because you couldn't hide because we were all so drawn to you. We were in a class together and you couldn't hide if you tried.
At the very beginning, that's how I started. But
Uh-huh.
then there was a gal who was in England, of all places, who went into our private Facebook group, recorded a video, and she was like, "Does anybody want to practice interviewing?" And I just said, "I will." And so we jumped on together. She was in England, I was in Seattle, USA, and we started fooling around. And then, we were like, let's hit record. Again, these things are all like a big step, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I realized, oh my gosh, like the whole interviewing thing is a huge hurdle as well. So like signing up for the class was a hurdle, and then starting to interview people, even if they were just my classmates, seemed like this insurmountable hill that I was never going to be able to climb. And I think what happened too is add some fun into it. Like as adults, I recently interviewed someone who said, we have forgotten how to play and
Yes.
fail and have fun. So,
Yeah.
like, and be bad at something and have fun. To
Yes.
do something, be bad at it and have
Yeah.
fun. And that's what happened to me when I was practicing with this gal in England. I can't even remember her name because I don't think she ever ended up podcasting.
Wow.
But
But what a
I
gift.
know, but I
Isn't it?
did. But,
Yes.
you know, we had fun,
Yay.
even though we were awful, right? But that's what children do.
Practice.
Like they will go try
Yes.
something new. They'll be really crappy at it
Yeah.
and they'll still have fun. And we
And
have to remember to do that as an
yeah.
adult.
And they'll decide whether they like it or not. And even if they're not that great at it, they'll get better because they'll do it. And see, this
Oh
is
yeah.
something I really missed in my growing up. I mean, when I was a young child, I did it. But then in young adulthood and things, I was too scared to fail, and didn't do
Yeah.
things. So you can't get better. So that's been a real relearning for me. And it's happened since I've been a parent. So yeah, that's such a great distinction.
Yeah. And then it started to become about helping other people. And
Yes.
so I started reaching out to other classmates and saying, hey, do you want to practice with me? Do you want to do some practice interviews? And of course, they were terrified, like I was, right? Like the first time I
Yeah.
knew that. So, but they would be like, well, okay, fine. And I'd send them the Zoom link and they'd jump on and we'd start chatting. And I'd be like, hey, why don't we just hit record just for fun? Let's
Yeah.
just do it. And
Yeah.
I did that with probably 5 people, and all 5 of them were like, oh my gosh, we just did an episode. And some of those actually did become episodes, some of my
Yes.
early episodes. Are they really good episodes? Hell no, they're really not that great. But you know what? It was a start and it got
Yeah.
them started too. And so
Yeah.
I'd be kind of sneaky because I'd be like, oh, we're just practicing. Okay, we're going to hit record. And then we're just, and some of those actually became episodes. And then it gave them the strength to turn around and say to somebody else, hey, do you want to practice? Hey, let's do this. Da da da. Got the ball rolling. And pretty soon
Yeah.
everybody was just like, people were just doing it. But I have to tell you one really funny story because there was a woman in the class who she was actually quite well accomplished already. She was a Canadian author. She was quite well published in books and articles, and she was a blogger. And I interviewed her. I forgot to hit the record button. This was my
Oh,
very first, like, outside of just sort of the fun, fooling around, classmate stuff. This was like a serious, like, I reached out to her and I said, hey, I would like to interview you. And I forgot to hit the record button.
that's my
So
fear.
that's like the worst thing that can happen, right? But she basically just was like, that's fine. We'll do it again. And so we did it
Wow.
again.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it would have been even better. That's the thing,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Nothing goes to
Yeah.
waste.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
It's amazing. Wow. And you really were a great model for that. You really did sort of set the tone. And a lot of us would just do it, and I did an interview with you as well. And it really did, yeah, it lifts something, doesn't it? When you just do it and
It
you
does.
realize
It
it's not
lifts
so
something.
scary.
Yeah, suddenly that thing when you actually do it, it it unveils it, and it's not this big scary
Yes.
thing anymore, you know?
Yes, it's just something
Yeah.
you do. And it's a conversation, a way of connecting with people who you enjoy, you know. So yeah, you've been a really great role model with that. And now you've gone on and you've been prolific. You've got an amazing podcast. And how many episodes are you at now?
You know how
Oh, well
there's
over
like a
100,
big,
I think.
yeah, I want to say between 120 and 130.
Wow.
Yeah, because I don't like, I know there's like this big sort of argument. Some people say it's good to number your episodes, and some people say it's a hindrance. So right now I'm not numbering them, but I'm gonna guess it's between 120 and 130.
Wow.
And see how much more relaxed I've become. I don't even
Absolutely.
know.
Yeah,
It
that's
doesn't
amazing.
matter. I don't want it to be about the numbers. And that was like another thing I think that really helped me get where I'm at today is that I refused to actually like look at my downloads when I first started. I never looked at my downloads. I didn't look at how I was doing number wise because I said
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. I'm just
Yeah.
doing this and I'm just learning and I'm growing. And then I launched on my late husband's birthday, January 2nd, 2 years ago.
Wow.
And yeah, and then um by the time it was May, one of my former classmates reached out to me and she said, there's an app called Listen Notes that analyzes podcasts. And she said, you're in the top 2.5% of all
Wow.
podcasts globally. Now, there's all kinds of, companies that analyze podcasts in all different ways. So it just depends on where you look. But this particular one, I was in the top 2.5%, and I was very, very excited. And
Yeah.
then from there, I think it was maybe 6 months later. Now I'm in the top 1.5%.
Wow, that's
And
amazing.
yeah,
See what
yeah,
happened when that's not your motivation.
yeah,
These things happen
yeah.
because people can feel it. There's no neediness. It's just you expressing yourself, you know, and
It's
that's
hard not
magnetic.
to have the neediness. Like
Yeah.
I think that tends to pop up in all of us. And we live in a culture of, you know, it appears to us that people get things instantly, that things are happening really fast for other people,
Yes.
and it's usually actually not the case. Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you probably know Mel Robbins. I
Yeah.
heard her interviewed like 5 years ago, and I'd never heard of her, and I said she's going to be great
Yeah.
soon because
Yes.
she interviewed so well, and she'd written a couple of books. But she's been writing books and speaking on stages for like 20 years. And then
Wow.
2 years ago, she decided to start a podcast. And now she's
Yes.
like the number one podcast. I'm sure people look at her and go, oh, well, I can start a podcast and become like Mel Robbins in 2 years. Well, no, she was like more like 20 years in the making.
Yeah. And I just heard her
That's,
interviewed by Oprah actually on Oprah's podcast.
yeah,
And that's, you know, it's good to remember. Okay, that didn't
yeah.
happen overnight, you know.
No, I mean, like there was a lot of things going on behind the scenes
Yeah.
for her,
Yeah.
before for that podcast to move that quickly,
Yeah. And this is her time. That's the thing, you know.
Yeah.
This is the moment when people need what she has to say the most, I think.
Yep.
So there's always
Yep.
it's always timing as well, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
can never compare, and comparing ourselves to others is the surest way to absolute misery and suffering, isn't it?
Yeah.
I learned that at quite an early age. So this season we're really focusing a lot on, you know, different ways to heal and regulate ourselves. This has been a real journey for me over the past year, is seeing things come up and finding ways to heal and regulate my nervous system. I too have had a real anxiety disorder in my life, and that's pretty much managed to some extent now. But you know, things keep popping up, and I really do find, especially just in the lead up to Christmas and New Year's, and there was a lot going on. And actually, I just turned 50 as well in December. So actually, it's
Oh,
so really early December. You know, I was having a big party and traveling back to my hometown and having a party. And I felt a lot of dysregulation popping up.
hmm.
And I was busy. So I was sort of forgetting a little bit about my practices. And then as soon as
Yep.
I came back to them, suddenly it's like, oh, that's right. I really need this. You can't skip them, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
especially through a lot of the challenges for you and I mean, it's no wonder that you're, diagnosed with anxiety, especially after going through such a lot and having a youngest child and, being a widow, essentially, weren't you, at that
Yeah.
time? And I know there
Hmm.
was more to it because it was a process, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was
As
a
well.
long, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about whether you had those tools then or if you've found them since and what's really helped you.
Oh, such a good question. I mean, I think I did learn some of the tools back then, but I feel like I'm so much better now through podcasting. In the last
Yeah.
2 years, the tools that I've learned, I've gotten so much better. Back then, it was just kind of trying to fumble around and try to figure out what would work, and denial was sometimes a good thing and still is sometimes a good thing where you
Yep.
just needed to just kind of step back and say, I catching your thoughts. Like I happened to right when my husband was diagnosed with his illness, I happened to like be part of Oprah's book club where she was
Oh,
reading
wow.
Eckhart Tolle's new book at that time, which was A New Earth,
Yeah.
Coming into Your Life's Purpose. It's something like that. It definitely
Yes.
starts with a new earth. And, he talks about the power of now, which is a very hard concept to grasp. But I had tried to read his books previously and I couldn't understand them, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
And in this thing, it was like cutting edge. You'd jump on live once a week. I think it was like Monday nights at 6 p.m. You'd get on the internet with like, God knows, like tens of thousands of people. And Oprah and Eckhart would like talk about one chapter a week. So first week you'd read just chapter one, and then they would answer all your questions. And we
That's
went through the whole
amazing.
book. I know. And by the time we got through the whole, and you can still access that on YouTube.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
Google it, look up like Oprah, Eckhart, A New Earth videos, and you can watch it for free. And
Wow.
it literally was a game changer for me for understanding more about learning how to live in the present, because when
Yeah.
you have a sick spouse, if all you're thinking about is they're going to die, you're just going to be miserable and anxious all the time, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
So
absolutely. And
um
especially if you've got a child as well. I mean, they're growing and developing and living life. So you really would have been pulled in two directions, I can imagine.
yeah, yeah, and my anxiety was really extreme at one point. And so for that chapter of my life, there's going to be like two different chapters I'm going to talk about this
Yeah.
subject. So in that chapter of my life, there we got the diagnosis. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. And what I always advise people, if you're, really, really, really not functioning, like completely hit a wall,
Yeah.
I just literally went to the emergency room.
Wow. Wow.
And
Yeah.
at the time I lived in a small town in Oregon, and one of my best friend's husbands worked as an ER doctor. He was working that day. I
Mhm.
did not want to see him. I was so embarrassed.
Yeah.
And he couldn't treat me because he knew me, but he did pop in to my room and say, "Hey, I'm really glad you're here because I'm not actually surprised, and I'm really proud of you for getting help because
Yes.
you're dealing with a lot right now, and it's a lot, and it's very normal to be very stressed at this time, and we can help
Mm.
And so I started doing therapy, which I hadn't done before, and I got medication help.
Yeah.
got help from everything, doctors, naturopaths, everything. And so at that phase of my life, what I say to people from that is ask for help. You
Yes.
need to just get over yourself and do what you need to do
Mm.
to get the help that you need to get you over the hump, you know?
Yes. And thank
Yeah.
goodness now we're recognizing that, because in the past there was like more of a stigma, if you had something wrong with, your physical body, would go and get medicine and get help for it. But,
Hmm.
over in time, so if it's a mental health problem, we think, oh no, I should be able to manage it myself. But no,
It's not that you won't get through it, but I
yeah.
just say like I wanted to be as emotionally healthy as I could raising my
Yes.
child who was 5 at the time. So,
Yeah. Wow.
I didn't want to just be completely dysfunctional. And that was many, many years ago, 16 years ago. And I think we've come a long ways now with, just talking more about mental health and saying, hey, like, it's okay. Like, let's just talk about it more. And I think even
Yeah.
just by talking about stuff, like I remember, Lydia, like for years, I was ashamed of that moment. Like nobody
Wow.
knew,
Wow.
and I talk about it now. Like I'll talk about it. And once you begin talking about something that you're ashamed of,
Yeah.
it takes away its power
Take, yeah.
completely,
That's such an important thing, isn't it? Yeah. Bringing something you're ashamed about into the light makes it dissipate. And I mean, these days, you're quite right. I mean, the tables have turned so much, and we do talk about these things so much, and people will talk about how they have therapists and they have therapy a couple of times a week, and how much it helps them in advocating for it. But there was a more shameful side of
It
it
was
back
a more
then.
shameful,
Yes.
yes. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Where like I just want to read this quote because it just popped
Yeah.
up on my feed yesterday and I was like, oh, and it's Eckhart
Oh,
Tolle who
wow.
says it. He says, if uncertainty is unacceptable to you, it turns into fear. If it is perfectly acceptable, it turns into increased aliveness, alertness, and creativity. Isn't that
Wow.
interesting?
That
How
is
we can
so
turn
interesting.
our fear, I think we still live in a society where we're like, I feel fearful today. Like I feel off today.
Yeah.
Okay, let's just start with I feel unbalanced today. Guess what, Lydia? There is no such thing as perfect balance. It's constantly a little bit too busy or a little bit not too busy. So
Mm-hmm.
it's never perfectly balanced. And
Yeah.
that's okay. Just work
Yeah.
towards balance. Be gentle with yourself as you work towards that. And these are some of the things that I've learned along the way in podcasting, that not to go for the perfection, to
Yeah.
observe my anxiety or my fear and say, it is what it is. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm not going to have a very productive day today because I'm dealing with a lot of stuff in my personal life.
Yeah.
And that's totally, totally okay. That being said, I mean, I feel like it was quite different. I mean, some of the things when my husband was really ill back those years ago, I did
Mm.
find things like, and this is still the same today, connection is probably one of the most important
Yes.
things. Getting out and going and doing things with your friends and not talking about the elephant in the
Mhm.
room. Give
Yeah.
yourself a break from the elephant in the room. If you're going
Yeah.
through something, don't talk about it. Talk about everything else. Talk about your kids. Talk about vacations. Talk about great movies, Netflix. Give yourself a
Yeah.
break from it. That was how I got through it back then. Now, how I've elevated that to some degree is what I started noticing is when I started my podcast in that first year, I
Mhm.
lost four people in my life, four friends.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And it was me who
Oh.
changed and who ended the relationship. And
Oh.
what I really started noticing is, I just was talking about go out with your friends, but I'm taking it one step further.
Mhm.
Whatever you do, when you go out and you spend time with anybody, after you say goodbye with that coffee date with that girlfriend and you get in the car, how do you feel? How
Yeah.
do you feel? Do you feel good? Do you feel elevated? Or do you feel just like drained? Do you feel
Yes.
depressed, depleted? Now, hold on, folks. I don't want you to be like, oh, well, really, Kristina? So you don't like allow your friends to dump on you emotionally when they're going through a rough time? No, I'm not. We all have rough times. I mean, one of my best girlfriends that I've been friends with since we were 18 had a rough couple of years and is just coming out of it on the other side. Have I dumped her? No, I have not, because she was going through stuff, and she's coming out through it and she's working through it. That's different. But those people who are kind of emotionally stuck, in kind of a low vibration where
Yeah.
they're negative Nellies. I call them negative Nellies. I did a solo episode on this too, where I talked
Yeah.
about it. And, it cannot, podcasting takes a huge amount of resources, of your time and your
Yeah.
energy. And if somebody is sucking it out of you, in
Yeah.
addition to that, you can't afford it anymore. It's too expensive. It's too costly.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I totally know what you mean, actually. And I've had a couple of people in my life too who fallen away as friends, just me spending less time with them and falling away.
and that's
But
perfectly fine too. Like
yeah.
some of that has happened too, where it's just a little bit less time, and
Well,
or it doesn't have to be dramatic either.
yeah.
Like, I mean, I literally said to all these people, like, I still love you, but I just, and if I happen to see you, I'm gonna like say hi and give you a hug and say, "Hi, are you?" But,
Yeah.
we're just in totally different places.
Yeah, yeah. One in particular I can think about was just sort of crazy making. There's always drama, and they were
Yeah,
actually crazy makers. Whenever I'd come away, I'd feel sort of bamboozled and bruised and just emotionally exhausted because I'd hear about all these dramas. And that's
right.
fine. Like you say, people do go through difficult times, but
They
this was
do.
for years, and it was like,
Yeah,
no, this is
that's what
just
I'm
this
talking
person.
about.
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying is like, I'm not saying, and don't be rash about it.
yeah,
But you can't change people. They
yeah.
they may change themselves. What's fascinating too is I kind of, even before I started podcasting, I had a friend for a while, but she was a little bit, I think she was kind of depressed too. And yeah, so we just kind of drifted apart. And then our sons reconnected a couple years ago, and now we're
Oh,
starting to reconnect, and we've
oh,
both grown a
wow.
lot. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it doesn't have to be forever either,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, there's a time and a place. That's right. And they do, I mean, this is very important though, because they do say you become like the, what is it, five
The
people you surround.
five
Yeah.
people you spend the most time
Yeah.
with. So
And you
you
don't
have to be very diligent. You pay very close
Mhm.
attention to the people who you surround yourself with. That has been a
Yeah.
game changer for me, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not a snob. Like,
No.
like it
No.
has nothing to do with wealth or success. It's
No.
all about how I feel being with people.
Yep, how people make you feel. It's so important. And actually, I've
Yep.
just been reading that book Worthy by Jamie Kern Lima.
Hmm.
Have you seen that one? And
Yes, yes.
yes,
I,
and
I I've been listening to it. I've not quite finished it, but I've been listening to it in the car.
yeah, it's very interesting. And one of the chapters is called Circle or Cage. Are the people in your life like a
Oh, yeah.
circle, or are they caging you in and not letting you grow and express yourself? So it's very important who you
So
surround yourself with.
good. I
Yeah.
love that. And that is a great point in thinking about the people you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
How do I feel? Are they
Yeah.
allowing me to grow, or are they keeping me in a cage? Are they trying to
Yeah.
keep me, you know? Yeah.
Stuck.
Here's a really, really important thing. And it kind of goes back to, the dramatic moment in the ER room many years
Yes.
ago versus, where I'm at today. I had a guest on named Kat Spangler, who's a podcaster as well, and it was a couple of months ago, and I was asking her like, as far as sometimes you literally don't have the bandwidth to do the thing. Like you
Yeah.
just can't. Like if you'd asked
Yeah.
me to create a podcast during those years when my son was growing up and my husband was ill, I couldn't do it, right?
No.
I
No.
was I was just not able to. You also mentioned this friend whose life was always in chaos. And what Kat Spangler said was a lot of us in, Western culture are living in fight or flight mode.
Yes.
That's how
Yeah.
we function. Like we
Yeah.
we live that way every day. And you cannot actually get yourself to take even a baby step,
Yeah.
really, if you're in
Yeah.
fight or flight mode. You
Yeah.
can't build a business. You can't, well, I mean, you can, but it's 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 not going to go as well and it's going to be really hard. And
Yeah.
so she said just start with getting back into grounding yourself.
Mm.
And so she taught me like something really simple that I've been doing. And
Mhm.
sometimes I'll do it anywhere. You can do it anywhere, anytime. We're going to do it right now.
Yeah.
And it works
Great.
beautifully. I did it this morning because I had 10, I think between 10 and 15 schedulers reach out to me in the last week.
Wow.
And a lot of them are authors, and they were all like, and then my Calendly link, so where people schedule, an interview with me, broke. And so everything was just jumbled up. And now I'm like untangling it all. And so this
Yeah.
morning, I was still untangling it and I was feeling a little bit fight or flight.
Yeah.
What you do is you just take like a breath in through your nose and then a deeper breath in as deep as you can into your chest and hold it just for a couple of moments and then just really let yourself exhale. So I'm going to do it with you just like one right now like
I love that. Okay.
so just do it 3 times. And
do you want to lead us through it one more time?
Sure. Okay. So
Yeah.
just take a breath in through your nose and then go another breath in as deep as you possibly can. Just go as deep as you possibly can in, and hold it for a few seconds and then breathe out your mouth. Just like release it. And it's just like, it's not like you have to count numbers. Like, you know how they say, okay, well, count 8, hold
Yes.
it for 4, count 6, blah, 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 whatever it is. And I'm like, no, I like this method better. And I do it anywhere, anytime. Maybe
Simple.
I've had an encounter in traffic that's not good. Somebody just honked at me. Boom, just do that a few times.
I mean, the key is just to exhale longer than your inhale, and we all can feel that we're doing that. But yeah, that's right. When we count, it feels formal and like work, doesn't it? So just
To me, it does. I mean,
Yeah.
I know a lot of people need that structure, but for me, I think I intuitively know to really, do that. Like what you said, I like the fact that you just added, be sure that your exhale is, and I think it naturally pretty much happens, but just be sure your exhale is longer than the inhale. And that is such a good thing, and then another one is just catching your thoughts, so that you're thinking something, you're driving down the street, you see a girl, she's like got it all together, and you're like, that's not me. And I catch myself and I go, that's okay. Like, that doesn't have to be me. Like, I'm just as good. And, correcting those thoughts. So that self-awareness, catching your thoughts and then correcting them is good.
We have no idea what other people, what they're like as well. They're going through their own struggles and things. And it's just our mind which thinks that, isn't it? But just catching it and realizing.
It took me months to do this, and it was very gradual, but I've gradually decreased the amount of time I spend on social media and on my phone in general. I sometimes leave my phone at home when my husband and I go out for dinner deliberately, that kind of a thing. I have it on silent or I leave it. And I just pick one app. So for me, that's Instagram. Follow me on Instagram. I've got over 30,000 followers now.
Wow.
So, I don't post a lot, but I do pop on sometimes. And don't you notice, like, a lot of times, like, Facebook, if I go into Facebook, I usually come out of that feeling not very good because everybody's showing only the good parts of their life.
The highlight reel.
Or the highlight reel.
Absolutely.
So, I don't spend time on Facebook anymore. Instagram, what I've done is, and you can do this on Facebook, but pick one app, just one. So for me, I chose Instagram and I started following really inspirational people. That could be like Tony Robbins. It could be Coot Blackson. It could be, Mel Robbins, and my cat's making a cameo here.
I see it.
Watching the video version of this. My cat just like walked across the screen.
I love it.
I had the door closed and my cat was hiding somewhere in the room. Oh my gosh, cat cameo. Yeah. So like, even if I do scroll on Instagram, it's pretty much all uplifting and or cute animals.
Yes.
Like, I'm really into that.
Yeah. That's the best thing for regulating your nervous system. Having, uplifting people and cute animals and things. That's such a good thing because I think social media really plays into mental health. And I've been reading a book called The Anxious Generation about the generation which is growing up.
I read that book. I read that book. It's so
alarming.
Good. I feel like but I also feel like everyone needs to read it because I feel like especially anybody 50 and over, 60s, 70s, they're very judgy about it. They're like, what is wrong with these kids? Like they're so entitled. They weren't raised right. And then when you read The Anxious Generation, you find out that cell phones, smartphones came in 2008 and literally changed these kids' brains. And now in the US, it's probably already happened. You guys are generally ahead of us on things in New Zealand, but it's too late for my son who had, they all could like bully each other online and be on their phones during high school, but they're now starting to ban. My late husband's niece, who's still, I consider my niece, is a high school principal here in the Seattle area. And she was one of the first people to ban cell phones at school. And I
Wow.
was like, hallelujah, praise the
Yeah.
Lord, because she read
Yeah.
that book and it just was in the last 6 months. So we're just starting to fix this huge, awful problem
Yeah.
that has really messed up a lot of kids.
It really has.
Yeah.
It's happened in Australia. They're starting to. Some schools have done it here, but in Australia, they've banned cell phones in schools, which is so great. And
So good.
yeah. I hope you enjoyed part 1 of my conversation with Kristina. Here are the takeaways. Number 1, using affirmations like I am safe or other Louise Hay teachings can be a simple yet powerful way to calm the nervous system, reducing feelings of anxiety and increasing a sense of safety. 2, simply identifying and naming an emotion like I feel anxious can help regulate the nervous system by calming the amygdala and reducing the fight or flight response. 3, breathwork doesn't have to be complex. It can be as simple as sighing or extending the exhale, both of which will help bring the nervous system into a more balanced, relaxed state. Number 4, building new habits like adding a meditation practice after yoga makes it easier to integrate self-care into daily routines, helping to manage anxiety over the long term. Number 5, creating a curated life that supports mental and emotional well-being is essential in managing and regulating the nervous system effectively. Number 6, stepping to purpose takes courage, particularly for women who have spent much of their lives fulfilling societal expectations. Number 7, living authentically means making choices based on inner alignment rather than seeking validation from external sources or societal norms. Number 8, in order to heal and truly step into purpose, it's crucial to regulate the nervous system first. Operating from survival mode or emotional dysregulation makes it hard to make meaningful progress towards big goals. Thank you so much for joining me. If you think someone you know might benefit from this episode, please share the link with them. And make sure you tune in next Thursday for part 2 of this episode with Kristina Driscoll. Brave, authentic, and resilient, managing anxiety and living on purpose. Have a great week.